Some of the lights we use now, you can't see them. They're so deep. They're in the infrared. Your retina is just incapable of seeing them, but it has a very big effect on the retina. If we can recharge that battery, the battery gets run down as we use it. It gets down as we get old. The mitochondria regulate your pace of aging. So if we can play with that battery, we can affect a whole load of things. And the biggest picture, of course, is things like aging. We're not all going to get macular degeneration, but we're all going to age and we're all going to die. And if we can keep the battery afloat, we can improve the quality of life for people as they move into older age.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biohackers Lab. I'm your host, Gary Cohen, and on today's episode, I have Dr. Glen Jeffery. Dr. Jeffery is a professor of neuroscience at the University College of London's Institute of Ophthalmology. And I'm really excited to speak to you today, Glen, because your lab works with the eyes and retinas and mitochondria and red light and all this cool stuff. And I actually just stumbled across two of your they're old papers now because they're going back to 2021. So I'm late to the game on this one, but just fascinating stuff. And we're going to get into that, which is more to do with shining red lights into your eyeball and how that can affect your vision, and shining light on your back and how that can affect your sugar levels, which blew my mind, actually. So if you wouldn't mind just introing us into, how did your lab get into red light and the eye?
How did I get into red light? Well, I got into red light because a lab that I knew published a story on brain damage in animal models and how the animal recovered when they were exposed to red light. And I thought, this is random. This is really random. But I also thought these people actually were really good. They were very good. And when you read something that's a bit surprising, the first thing you tend to say is, "Do I know these people? Are these people they got a good track record, or are they out on the margin?" These were very, very good people, and so I was put on a vertical learning curve about this, about the fact that there was a literature out there on how people recover, particularly in terms of brain and retina, from damage or challenge when they're given red light. So, that needed an explanation, that needed a mechanism. And the mechanism slowly came out, which was, it's all to do with something called mitochondria. Mitochondria, there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of them in every cell. And as I say, to make things really simple for everybody, they're just batteries. They're just batteries. Let's not go down the pathway any further than that. And like some batteries, such as like mobile phone batteries, sometimes you can charge them at a distance. You can put them in places and they charge. And if you recharge that battery, or you just top up the charge sometimes, it can help the cell overcome some pretty challenging circumstances. And that was the basis of it. Now, it started to introduce a concept of light interacting with biology. Now, we're all cool about that if we're talking about plants, and we're cool about that if we're talking about vision. I just happened to use the eye. This wasn't about vision. A lot of these wavelengths of light you can't see. So that's kind of the general move into it. And I very much found myself standing alone in a field with no one to talk to, because that space between light and your body, which isn't about vision, is a very empty space. There's very few people in it. So it's got the disadvantages, you've got no mates to talk to. It's got the advantages that you've got a clear playing field to do what you want. So that was how we rolled into it. But for the first 5 or 6 years, I think I was treated a bit like, as if I'd lost my marbles. But I've overcome that one now.
and I kind of find it funny where, when we think about our eyes, we're always taught as a kid, don't shine the torch in your eyes, don't put light in your eyes. Yeah. And now we're at the stage of where we found actually, certain wavelengths of light are good for the eye.
Yeah.
So would you mind just giving us sort of a summary of what did you find when it came to red light and shining it into the eye? Okay,
so let's beam back to the issue of mitochondria and batteries. Right? I think it's the easiest concept to deal with. And the eye has got a problem. The eye has got a problem because it uses its batteries very, very heavily, very heavily. You can think about it in a number of ways, but you don't notice it. But you can move from one room to another room, and the luminance level can be easily 8 log units. Vast luminance change. And the retina deals with that. And it deals with it by having a very, very powerful amplifier that can turn up or turn down. That means it draws energy, right? It draws a load of energy. It burns energy in fact, it burns more energy per cell than any other part of your body. This adapting to different lights. So it's an ideal model for us using light. Forget about whether you can see it or not, because we can use that light to recharge the battery when it's having a rough time. Now, we can do that with other parts of the body, but I come from a vision background. All the equipment in my lab is vision stuff. So basically, it was very easy to move into that space. I'm playing with the batteries, but forget whether you can see the light or not. Some of these lights we use deep red light, which, has become publicized. You can just see that. Some of the lights we use now, you can't see them. They're so deep. They're in the infrared. Your retina is just incapable of seeing them, but it has a very big effect on the retina. If we can recharge that battery, the battery gets run down as we use it. It gets down as we get old. The mitochondria regulate your pace of aging. So if we can play with that battery, we can affect a whole load of things. And the biggest picture, of course, is things like aging. We're not all going to get macular degeneration, but we're all going to age and we're all going to die. And if we can keep the battery afloat, we can improve the quality of life for people as they move into older age. And the acid test of that is if you expose insects, including bumblebees, to red light, they live longer. They not only live longer, they're more mobile. Think about you as you get old. I know as I'm getting out of bed, the muscles aren't moving quite the way they should be. The bumblebees, the flies, all these short-lived animals live longer. They're more mobile as they get older. And if you could stick them on the table and talk to them, I'm sure they'd tell you that, they feel better about mobility. You can't do that with humans. You can't really even do it with mice. Mice in labs live for 3 years. For me to keep a mouse alive for 3 years is really going to empty my wallet. But we can do it with flies, and everything we find in a fly, we find in a human. So it's highly conserved, a deep evolutionary, highly conserved mechanism, this interaction between biology, batteries, and light.
And I love the battery thing because I also, actually, that's an analogy I used to use long time ago, was I look at everyone as a battery, actually. Like, how full are you when you're presenting to someone? So are you full of life? Are you full of energy?
Yeah.
We use that term all the time. So yeah, the battery analogy is a perfect one for this. And I think when I was doing a little bit of background reading around this, what you were just saying there with the mitochondria, how many of these little energy cells we have at the back of our eye in the mitochondria, and that determines the aging of the back of our eye and our vision. And that, again, just makes complete sense why we lose vision or our vision degrades over time as these mitochondria degrade over time. Is that correct? But what you're finding now is that we can give them a little bit of life again with maybe the right kind of light.
Yeah, so one of our early studies on humans, we moved from doing sort of animal experiments into humans. Practically everything we do now is in humans. And we took a whole group of people and we tested their color vision, how well they could look at the contrast of different colors. And so we got a baseline on everybody. We gave them a burst of red light. We brought them back later and we found that they'd significantly improved. Now, that was extremely pleasantly surprising, but there was an immediate, this was about 3 hours later, we got an improvement in people's vision. You could detect it, you could measure it, and you could put it on a graph, and there was no argument about it. So people, and it was more effective in older people than it was in younger people. That was a bit noisy, but I think we can generally make that point. So if you think about living longer, bees and flies, and you think about improving people's vision, so we know that it happens in humans, there's a really good argument for thinking about maybe we should be exposed to more red light than we generally are.
Yeah, and the other point that you were mentioning there with the age difference, I found personally interesting. I'm now in my 40s, so I fall into the age group that can benefit from this a little bit more maybe than others. And again, it just shows the difference, so someone who's maybe younger is full of more mitochondria, full of more energy, so they're not going to see the big change. But someone who's maybe on that pathway now, then they could use a little bit of a battery charge up. They're going to notice the bigger change. And so is that something that also happens naturally as we age? We lose that ability to differentiate between colors. Is that a normal part of aging?
Yeah, that is a normal part of aging. The interesting thing is the retina burns loads of energy, but if you burn loads of energy, you age fast. So the analogy I draw here is between, your old four-door saloon that your uncle used to drive and a sports car. Sports car moves like crazy. It burns more petrol, but the trouble with the sports car is it needs lots of servicing. It needs lots of looking after. So throughout the body, irrespective of where you are, if you burn more energy, if you've got high performance, you will have a faster pace of aging. That's pretty fundamental. And there was a chap who sadly isn't around anymore, who in the 1950s produced this mitochondrial theory of aging. And it was really great. And I'd love to take him out for a drink and say, hey, you were really right. This was right. And it has much bigger implications than I think you thought at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so is that also, I mean, you're in near an eye hospital, you were telling me, in London there.
Yeah.
And so, patients are getting treated for lots of eye conditions. Is light therapy now sort of getting accepted more in the ophthalmology world as a way of managing the health of the retina as it ages?
It is, but it's coming in different packages. So you can say that the scientists are now being taken quite seriously about the implications for long wavelength light, red light, and eye conditions. The trouble is we've got lots of people coming in from the sidelines selling devices to people to try and they make outrageous claims. So that the trouble with that is it cuts the floor from underneath me. So we have two clinical trials, one for a disease called retinitis pigmentosa. We have another one for mitochondrial disease in children. And to get those, we've had to make a lot of effort to get acceptability, and we have got acceptability. At the same time, I must get 10, 15 emails every day from really, terribly nice people in someone like in Nebraska saying, I'm a bit worried about my eyes, and I've seen this thing that I can get for China for $72. Should I buy it? I can't comment. I haven't seen this device. It's very likely to be something that really won't hold together very well. It may not do what it says on the package. So we've got noise coming in from the side, and that noise is economic interest, which is saying, I want to sell you something, give me your credit card number, and you'll live forever. That's not doing me any good, and it's not doing the person any good. In principle, more red light is good, but how do we manage this rogue element that comes in and just wants to make money? I don't know how to deal with that one. I just don't. But I do feel, and I've said this regularly, I do feel we have a moral obligation to answer those emails, to say to people, look, this is the situation. And as I've said repeatedly in podcasts and everything, I will try to answer people's emails. It rubs out a bit of my life, but it's really important we do that. Ridiculous promises are made. We're going to cure all these diseases. No, we're not going to cure these diseases. We may slow them down. We may derail them a bit. But if you're blind, you're not going to see again. Let's be real. Let's be realistic about it. So there are those two factors, but there are a number of places where red light is being considered. So the other one is in cases of stroke. If you have a stroke, your mitochondria in your brain suffer like crazy. And if they suffer beyond a certain point, what the mitochondria can do is they put their hand up and they say to the cell, die. That's it. We've had enough. Can we hold them back from that point? And so we're talking to clinicians about how we might introduce red lights into clinical environments. They don't have to even be seen, these very long wavelength lights. They do absolutely no harm. But, that we've never found a downside to them. And so that is getting traction. If you spend money, say, on a long wavelength light bulb, let's say you spend £5, right? If that improves the chances of survival in 1% of cases, that's a winner. That's an absolute winner. And that is being taken seriously. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic to hear, because I look at it's that sort of risk benefit ratio there. And as you said, the risk so far clinically has been very, very little to, I guess it's hard to quantify in some of the cases. Maybe the risk is that it does nothing, so that's the worst risk in some of these cases. But yeah, I think it's great. It's the benefit could be massive for some people. And so are we at the stage, I mean, it's been a few years since you managed to release some of your research when it came to that I think I'll get into a little bit more nitty gritty, because some people, as you said, they're going to email you straight after this and want to know even more detail. And so it was that 670 nanometer, is that the magic wavelength that it comes for the eye here?
No, the 670 was used because the first device that came out used 670 nanometers, right? And so longer wave, we've moved slightly away from 670 nanometers now, because that's a bright red light that you can see. And that floods your world with red light. I don't want to flood your world with red light. So we've now working with longer wavelengths that are equally as good, if not better. So we use 850 a lot. 850, you can't see it. Not unless you put your face right up against it. You can't see it. So that means it's possible to deliver something to you that might have therapeutic value that does not disturb you. So what we're thinking about mitochondria and aging. Can we get those lights into nursing homes? Can we, and that is a real topic of discussion. Can we get them in? And we've now made ceiling tiles that fit into the ceiling that are just full of infrared 850 LEDs. They work relatively well. Now, we've not got them into a nursing home, but we've certainly sat some people down and give them a cup of coffee underneath and tested their vision before and after without them knowing what the hell's going on. And their vision gets better.
Wow.
So yeah, let's try and translate it without people making a vast sum of money out of it. That's our big drive. Yeah.
I love that placebo test you just did there, so something like that where it's a wavelength you can't see, so the person doesn't even know, but you could do an objective test and see there's a difference. And so for you, that must be so validating, so exciting to be like, who would have thought this invisible thing is now making this difference to someone?
But, there is something else when you talk about wavelengths and light bulbs. So older light bulbs that we had when we were children that got hot, incandescent light bulbs, we got rid of them because 90% plus of the energy that they produced was wasted in heat through infrared light. Now we have LEDs that don't waste anything. But the key thing that we're also considering is what happens if we just take an old incandescent light bulb and we put that into your environment? Well, the interesting thing is it improves your vision. So have we robbed the world of an important source of light that was promoting mitochondrial health? And the answer to that is yes, we have. So having LED lights have got no red in them whatsoever. Even when they look red, they're not red. There's no long wavelength light in them. And when we put animals under those lights, put them under straight LED lights, their vision suffers. We've just finished the study where we've been going around putting LED lights close to people's computer screens. It doesn't do their vision any favors at all. So in the world, in the visual world, mitochondria don't like blue light. It discharges the battery. They do like red light because it increases the charge on the battery. And in our olden world, with our incandescent light bulbs and sunlight, we had a balance between the two. Incandescent lights produce energy very similar to sunlight, very similar. And then around 2005, we moved away from that, and all the red light was taken away. So that's one of the other challenges we've got. Can we go around putting incandescent lights into spaces? Because the incandescent light has got loads of 850 in it, and it's actually got a load of other long wavelength lights in it as well. So can we promote health by taking a step backward and using an incandescent light? And we just finished a study with people at the Bartlett School of Architecture, where we've gone around changing light bulbs. And I must say, best result we've ever had in our life. And one really interesting story is, you can learn things from anecdotal stories. And one guy, we tested his vision, and it was really good, really good. And I was saying to my colleagues, we're never going to get this guy. We're never going to improve this guy. And you ask lots of stupid questions then, like, can you ride a motorcycle? Do you eat vegetables? All these ridiculous things because you're not thinking properly. And we gave him basically an incandescent light, and we didn't improve him very much. And my colleague, who was a bit sharper than me, said to him, when you put your hand on your light bulbs in your bedroom, what do they feel like? And he said, I can't do that because they're too hot. The guy had incandescent light bulbs at home. God knows why he had them, but he had old incandescent light bulbs, and his visual system was performing at pretty much maximum performance anyway. And that was. It's a funny story, not only because it reinforces what we're doing, but it also tells you what stupid ideas you have when you're not getting the data you're expected to get in, and you start asking people about their balance, about their diet, all the rest of it, which isn't going to do what we found. So lighting is becoming incredibly important, and getting that balance of blue and red back together. If you're sitting in a room with LED lighting, it's fundamentally blue, even though you don't see it as blue, and it has a component that undermines mitochondria. So we're getting there in the clinic, but we're also getting there with the architects and the lighting engineers.
And I mean, I'm just that one makes me laugh because, again, it's so funny. You think we've gone through this massive drive of, as you said, everyone's got to get rid of the old bulbs, not energy efficient, get everything LED, drop all of this, and then suddenly we find out, wait, there was a health benefit to those old bulbs because of the wavelengths and the vision. You can imagine, but I'm just thinking myself now, maybe I need to get a couple of old incandescent lights into my room over here too. I'm lucky enough I got some sunlight coming through the window over here. But so is there any way to make LED act like incandescent with the wavelengths? Is that where architects maybe are going to have to go versus going back to incandescent bulbs?
We're never going to get incandescent bulbs back. Right? We're never going to get them back because they're too energy inefficient. The American government is just passing legislation to ban them. In the UK, they're not banned. You can still get them off Amazon, and they're still made in China. But building regulations do not allow you to put them into a new building. So we've got to find a compromise somewhere. And you put your finger absolutely right, right on it, which is, how do we change an LED light bulb? So what we were lucky to get a company to do for free is to take an old LED light, or to take an LED light bulb, take the front off it, and stick in extra LEDs of longer wavelength. So we took an LED won't produce light generally over about 650, 680 nanometers, and at that level, it's producing very little energy anyway. So we got them, we took the front off, and we stuck in some 850 LEDs. And yes, that gave us improvement. No question. It gave us improvement. But it didn't give us as much improvement as an incandescent light bulb. And I think the thing is that we can stick an 850 LED in, gives us a spike that you can't see. But the incandescent light bulb has got a whole range going into over 2000 nanometers of infrared light. So what we need to do is we need to take the LED light and we need to put a number of long wavelength, deep red LEDs in it to cover the same spectrum as you get in an incandescent light and as you get in sunlight. So we've gone to talk to the people who gave us our light bulbs with the 850 in. And I said, can you do this? And they went, yeah, we can do it. We're not going to do it until there's demand for it, but we can do it. So we can find a compromise so that we don't drastically increase the energy we use. You can put your hand on this bulb and it will still be cool, but it can produce loads of longer wavelength light. So there is a compromise, it is doable, and we want to get to a situation where we can throw all the data together and say, this is the sensible route forward. But that's got to be a route that you not only take to the National Health Service, it's got to be a route that you actually take to legislators. You've got to actually be able to take it to government agencies and say, if we do this, we have the ability to improve A, B, and C, and you need to promote it. So I can easily get, a consultant somewhere to promote it in a particular hospital, but we need universal promotion for healthcare and well-being in people. So we need them in gyms, we need them in schools. One of the big thing about not having long wavelength light is it's associated with myopia. So if you don't get daylight, you spend all your time inside, you do a lot of close reading, you get a lot of myopia, which is a very big issue in the Far East. Slowly becoming a big issue here as kids spend a lot of time on screens. Kids are in schools without those massive great windows that Victorian schools had. They're let in oodles of infrared light. We need to change. And the windows are actually really important because windows now, because you want to control the temperature in your building, windows block infrared. So new glass in corporate buildings, these big glass temples, they block the infrared. So you've got potentially a toxic LED, and any therapeutic light, long wavelength light that you would get coming in from the window, that's gone, that's blocked. So you can put your hand on an infrared blocking window when it's in sunlight and it's cool. It's not hot. So all of it, we've got ourselves in this situation for all the right reasons. That's saving energy.
Yeah.
That's saving energy. But we perhaps moved a bit too quick and we didn't look back. I suspect that's where the element of the problem is.
Well, I guess the odd thing here is, we're saving energy in one hand, electricity, but we're not saving human energy, like you were talking about from a battery point of view. We're wasting our energy, and what you're saying makes complete sense to me too. Where I think about, you go into certain environments and fluorescent bulbs or some types of bulbs, and they make you feel sickly. The lighting can make, and I mean, what you were telling me earlier about nursing homes, I would love it that you could implement better lighting that would energize someone who needs a lot of energy to reduce the risk of fall, to be able to see things. I mean, what could that, if someone could ever come up with a quantification of, like, it saves X amount of money on the NHS because now you don't have to have, we suddenly, even a 5% drop in fall rate equates to this,
exactly.
Something like that.
So I have learned slowly that you need to put your argument in a different way. So working with actually a commercial lighting company who were very much on our side, they were talking to a very big corporation about changing lighting because the whole building was being completely stripped and rewired. And the guy running the lighting company said to them, do you know how many days have been lost through people in this building complaining about headaches? What does that cost you? So the issue of cost, which doesn't naturally come to my mind, came to their mind. And I think, that is, what does it cost for us to have bed blocking in the NHS? could we, by changing the lighting, potentially just erode that just a small amount, And you very rightly point out the issue of falls. Okay, so we know that if we improve mitochondrial ability, we can, in animals, improve motor skills. We're working on that to try and measure that in humans. Someone who's 85 who falls and breaks their hip, that's costing the NHS an enormous sum of money. That person will go into a hospital. They'll be difficult because they're aged. You've got to be very careful about what you do with them. And there's a chance that suddenly by putting that person horizontal for a number of days and putting them through a surgical procedure, you've not only cost the NHS a lot of money, you've increased the probability they're going to die from things like pneumonia because they're suddenly flat on their back. So I've started to work out costs, which doesn't come to me naturally. I'm a scientist. But the cost is the way of getting leverage over people that make decisions. Because people that make decisions over money. They tend not to make decisions over other things like perhaps slightly vaguer concepts like well-being. The NHS wants you to come in and say, drug A costs me £1. They want me to come in and say, I now have got drug B that costs you 99p. That's the kind of the thought process. They're not very comfortable with you walking in saying, I want to introduce something you've never measured before. You've never dealt with it. It doesn't involve a drug company and it's fundamentally free. Oh, that throws everybody, I'm afraid. But I'm learning to talk about money or other people's money anyway.
Well, good luck on that. That's a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
So we've spent the first little bit talking about vision, and there's so much more we could talk about from a vision point of view. But the other part I alluded to in the beginning of this conversation was the sugar levels and what you found there. So if I probably just give my summarization of it, was that you found by shining red light again on someone's back, again, this mind-blowing thinking, this is on someone's back we're talking about, just a piece of skin on your back, but then it affected the body's ability to not have such a severe spike in your glucose levels, your blood sugar levels after a test. Is that basically the gist of what you found?
That's the gist of it, and this is, I must say, I didn't have that idea. That idea was held by a very good colleague of mine, Mike Powner. We were driving to a scientific meeting, and 2 hours. A 2-hour drive's great because you can start thinking and talking and no one disturbs you. And Mike said to me, if we're making mitochondria work hard, mitochondria need extra sugar, right? So they make energy, but to make energy, they need to burn sugar. Very simple. And he said, well, if we're making them work harder and they're burning sugar, there's only one place they can get sugar from, and that's the serum. To be honest, it was blindingly obvious, but I didn't get it. So I said, I think my first reaction was, well, I'm not doing that experiment because, I know what blood sugar tests are, pricking people's fingers, getting them to drink vast amounts of glucose. I'm not doing that. So he came back with a very smart comment. And he said, why don't we do it with bumblebees? I don't think from that, because you can fast a bumblebee overnight, which is what the basis of a blood glucose tolerance test is. You can give a bumblebee a big drop of glucose, which the following morning it will consume instantly. And they do have blood, but we call it hemolymph. And you can extract the hemolymph and you can measure the sugar. So some of those we gave red light to, some of them we gave no light to, and some of them we gave blue light to. So the bumblebees that had the red light, their blood sugars did not peak very high. Ones had no light at all, their blood sugars peaked. And the ones that had blue light had a very big peak in their blood sugars because their mitochondria were not drawing glucose out of the serum. Right? We were telling them to close down, not make much energy. That was great fun. But then we then at this point said, we can't give people blue light. That's unethical, even though they're getting it all the time. And maybe they're suffering as a consequence of the LEDs with a lot of blue light in that. But we did go away and we found a whole group of ordinary people. We gave them glucose and we gave them a big burst of red light on their backs. Now, if you upregulate mitochondria in one part of your body, doesn't matter where it is, after a few minutes, those mitochondria send a signal around the body saying, look, everyone, we've got to up our game. We've got to increase our ability to make glucose and make energy. And it's called, people have known about this sort of thing for ages. It's called the abscopal effect. People who radiologists have known for ages that if you've got a big tumor here and you irradiate it, secondary tumors in different parts of your body respond. Okay, they don't actually shrink, but they stop growing up there. So we know there's this communication system. So it doesn't matter necessarily where you give the red light, as long as you give enough of it. And we don't want to use the eyes. We want to get right away from the eyes. And so those individuals that had that burst of red light, their blood glucose did not spike in the same way. That's all published. It's all there in open access. Now we've moved on. So Mike is doing a lot of type 2 diabetes people, and he's getting the same result. He's getting fundamentally the same result. Very difficult experiments to do because you've got to get people in and prick their fingers every few minutes to test their blood sugars. You've got to lean on your friends really heavily for this one. But the result is there. And theoretically, Mike said, in theory, this has to work. And he was absolutely right. It worked. So can we potentially control blood sugars with light? Well, if you look at the epidemiological evidence, people that spend more time outside in sunlight have got better control over their blood sugars than people that spend their time in the built environment. So population, and when we're talking now about tens of thousands of people, that's there. We went to the individual and it's there in the individual. And we're not talking about small changes. We're talking about quite significant changes in reduction of blood sugar spiking. So, and we're relying partly on this ability of mitochondria in different parts of the body to talk to one another. But another really good example of that is if you look at diseases like Parkinson's disease starts as a mitochondrial disease. Mitochondria in one part of the brain die. When they die, the cell dies. And then you start to produce someone who has great problems initiating movement or controlling movement. And there's some great work done by groups originally from Australia who induced Parkinson's disease in rodents and induced Parkinson's disease in primates. And they gave red light. Lo and behold, the symptoms were significantly reduced, very significantly reduced. The animal wasn't cured, but they were reduced. But in some of those experiments, in the original experiments, they put a red light in the brain. Big procedure. And then for controls, they shone red light in different parts of the primate's body. They got an almost the same effect. So when they shone red light on the abdomen or they shone red light on the lower part of the body, the animal with induced Parkinson's improved. So again, it's about this communication across the body, mitochondria talking to one another. We've isolated bloods, and we think we've got an idea what some of those messenger pathways are. Not all of them, but a few of them. Things like things called cytokines, inflammatory markers in the blood. They change all over the place when we give people red light. So you don't have to target your organ specifically to get an improvement, because it will get there eventually. And hence, that's why we did it on the back. We didn't want involvement of the eyes. And all of this was kind of, to some extent, shocking at the time, until we went back and read some of the literature. There were hints there all the way through that made us feel we probably got this one right. Yeah.
Mm.
So blood
And
sugars control is really super important. It's a diabetic crisis. We're too sedentary. It's not going to solve. It's not going to solve the problem of diabetes. But when you put it together with other things, we can change the probability. That's the important thing. Change the probability. If you eat loads of sweets and sit on the sofa all afternoon, well, it's going to be a challenge. But if we can get you to be a bit more mobile and put you under the right lights, it's not going to cost very much. And we are going to be able to influence your serum glucose levels.
And yeah, I'm thinking, a lot of listeners to this show, they come here because maybe they've had insulin resistance, so they're on that pathway, which most people are in the world now. I mean, diabetes type 1, type 2 diabetes is only on the rise in the human population. And so what I also find fascinating, Glenn, is I remember red light therapy, or photobiomodulation, the fancy name for it, was used for diabetic ulcers. So they found that shining red light improved diabetic ulcers and was able to, in some cases, save people from having amputation, which blew my mind back then too.
Yeah.
And now I'm finding it so funny thinking, can you imagine, like, the same red light is not only like helping to heal this ulcer, but it's helping to maybe modulate some of the glucose spike that this person's having, and they're not having to shine the red light on their pancreas, like get it into their stomach and shine it on the. I love all the secondary effects that just come from this. As your research just finds this, it's like,
well, it's going away and reading. And when there's NASA published a great paper a few years ago about astronauts on the International Space Station. These people are super fit. Their bodies are monitored every minute of the day, one way or another. But these people that are up there, they found two really interesting things about them. They found, and these were independent of gravity. They found, first of all, that they were all showing tendencies towards prediabetes, right? And they were all showing signs of premature aging. Now, when you look at a photograph in the International Space Station, it's all hard white LEDs. Absolutely. And so you find these little things and you think, hang on, I think that bit of the jigsaw fits in. It's changing the light environment is problematic. Very problematic. And we can't just run on LEDs, standard LEDs, without there being a price.
Yeah. Well, that is one of the big takeaways I'm taking away from this today. It's just that of how much could just the light environment that I'm in, just because I happen to go down the LED route, actually, it could.
We all did.
Yeah. And just maybe that's, as you said, someone does a cost-benefit analysis from your research and more research that comes from this, and then they can scale out putting the infrared LEDs into all the LED bulbs, and suddenly we have a different population because we're all a little bit more energized. We can maybe see a little bit better. Who knows? Could come
feel
from
a bit
this,
better.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care if I live another 10 years or another 20 years. I do care if I can get out of bed, cycle to work, do all the things that give me quality to my life. So yeah, I think that's super important and could save governments lots of money.
Yeah. And people just enjoying life more. Who knows what we get out of that? Just happy people, because they're all energetic too. So
yeah.
Glenn, I know you've got to be at another meeting in a little bit, so I'm not going to take too much of your time. I could ask you so much more around this topic, but I just want to say thank you so much. I love it. Again, just it's such a simple thing, red light, just light, but how it could have such a positive effect. And I love that note. Again, what's the risk? It's kind of like just being out in the sun for a little bit, just a little bit, not excessive. But suddenly you have all these downstream or upstream benefits. That's why I've always loved red light therapy. Just what fascinating things can come from this. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today and your insights on the human battery and how we can improve that.
It's been a pleasure. And part of my job now in life is to spend less time in the lab and spend more time trying to get the word out there, trying to get people who've got control of wallets and purse strings to think about changing, governments and organizations. We'll get there. Will we get there before I die? I don't know, but we will get there.
I hope so. So
Great.
Again, thank you so much, Glenn, for coming on for today.
Thank you for your time. I greatly appreciated it.